Bangladesh is a developing country that is classified as a Next 11 emerging market and one of the Frontier 5. According to a recent opinion poll, Bangladesh has the second most pro-capitalist population in the developing world. Between 2004 and 2014, Bangladesh averaged a GDP growth rate of 6%. The economy is increasingly led by export-oriented industrialization. The Bangladesh textile industry is the second largest in the world. Other key sectors include pharmaceuticals, shipbuilding, ceramics, leather goods and electronics. Being situated in one of the most fertile regions on Earth, agriculture plays a crucial role, with the principal cash crops including rice, jute, tea, wheat, cotton and sugarcane. Bangladesh ranks 5th in the global production of fish and seafood. Remittances from the Bangladeshi diaspora provide vital foreign exchange. The Bangladesh telecoms industry has witnessed rapid growth over the years and is dominated by foreign investors. The government has emphasized the development of software services and high-tech industries under the Digital Bangladesh scheme. Bangladesh has substantial reserves of natural gas and coal, and many international oil companies are involved in production and exploration activities in the Bay of Bengal. Regional neighbors are keen to use Bangladeshi ports and railways for transshipment. Located at the crossroads of SAARC, the ASEAN +3, BIMSTEC, and the Indian Ocean, Bangladesh has the potential to emerge as a regional economic and logistics hub. In 2015, per capita income stood at $1,314 US. While achieving significant macroeconomic stability, Bangladesh continues to face challenges such as infrastructure deficits and energy shortages. Economic history. East Bengal, the eastern segment of Bengal, was a historically prosperous region. The Ganges Delta provided advantages of a mild, almost tropical climate, fertile soil, ample water, and an abundance of fish, wildlife, and fruit. The standard of living is believed to have been higher compared with other parts of South Asia. As early as the 13th century, the region was developing as an agrarian economy. Bengal was the junction of trade routes on the southeastern Silk Road. Under Mughal rule, it was a center of the worldwide muslin, silk and pearl trade. The British East India Company, however, on their arrival in the late 18th century, chose to develop Calcutta, now the capital city of West Bengal, as their commercial and administrative center for the company held territories in South Asia. The development of East Bengal was thereafter limited to agriculture. The administrative infrastructure of the late 18th and 19th centuries reinforced East Bengal's function as the primary agricultural producer, chiefly of rice, tea, teak, cotton, sugarcane and jute, for processors and traders from around Asia and beyond. After its independence from Pakistan, Bangladesh followed a socialist economy by nationalizing all industries, proving to be a critical blunder undertaken by the Awami League government. Some of the same factors that had made East Bengal a prosperous region became disadvantages during the 19th and 20th centuries. As life expectancy increased, the limitations of land and the annual floods increasingly became constraints on economic growth. Traditional agricultural methods became obstacles to the modernization of agriculture. Geography severely limited the development and maintenance of a modern transportation and communications system. The partition of British India and the emergence of India and Pakistan in 1947 severely disrupted the economic system. The United Government of Pakistan expanded the cultivated area and some irrigation facilities, but the rural population generally became poorer between 1947 and 1971 because improvements did not keep pace with rural population increase. Pakistan's 5-year plans opted for a development strategy based on industrialization, but the major share of the development budget went to West Pakistan, that is, contemporary Pakistan. The lack of natural resources meant that East Pakistan was heavily dependent on imports, creating a balance of payments problem. Without a substantial industrialization program or adequate agrarian expansion, the economy of East Pakistan steadily declined. Blame was placed by various observers, but especially those in East Pakistan, on the West Pakistani leaders who not only dominated the government but also most of the fledgling industries in East Pakistan. Since Bangladesh followed a socialist economy by nationalizing all industries after its independence, it underwent a slow growth of producing experienced entrepreneurs, managers, administrators, engineers, and technicians. There were critical shortages of essential food grains and other staples because of wartime disruptions. External markets for jute had been lost because of the instability of supply and the increasing popularity of synthetic substitutes. Foreign exchange resources were minuscule, and the banking and monetary systems were unreliable. Although Bangladesh had a large workforce, the vast reserves of undertrained and underpaid workers were largely illiterate, unskilled, and underemployed. Commercially exploitable industrial resources, except for natural gas, were lacking. Inflation, especially for essential consumer goods, ran between 300 and 400%. The War of Independence had crippled the transportation system. Hundreds of road and railroad bridges had been destroyed or damaged, and rolling stock was inadequate and in poor repair. The new country was still recovering from a severe cyclone that hit the area in 1970 and caused 250,000 deaths. Between December 1971 and January 1972, India committed $232 million in aid to Bangladesh from the Politco economic aid India received from the USA and USSR. Official amount of disbursement yet undisclosed. After 1975, Bangladeshi leaders began to turn their attention to developing new industrial capacity and rehabilitating its economy. The static economic model adopted by these early leaders, however, including the nationalization of much of the industrial sector, resulted in inefficiency and economic stagnation. Beginning in late 1975, the government gradually gave greater scope to private sector participation in the economy, a pattern that has continued. Many state-owned enterprises have been privatized, like banking, telecommunication, aviation, media, and jute. Inefficiency in the public sector has been rising, however, at a gradual pace. External resistance to developing the country's richest natural resources is mounting, and power sectors including infrastructure have all contributed to slowing economic growth. In the mid-1980s, there were encouraging signs of progress. Economic policies aimed at encouraging private enterprise and investment, privatizing public industries, reinstating budgetary discipline, and liberalizing the import regime were accelerated. From 1991 to 1993, the government successfully followed an enhanced structural adjustment facility with the International Monetary Fund but failed to follow through on reforms in large part because of preoccupation with the government's domestic political troubles. In the late 1990s, the government's economic policies became more entrenched, and some of the early gains were lost, which was highlighted by a precipitous drop in foreign direct investment in 2000 and 2001. In June 2003, the IMF approved a 3-year, $490 million plan as part of the Poverty Reduction and Growth Facility for Bangladesh that aimed to support the government's economic reform program. Up to 2006, $70 million was made available immediately. In the same vein, the World Bank approved $536 million in interest-free loans. In the year 2010, Government of India extended a line of credit worth $1 billion to counterbalance China's close relationship with Bangladesh. Bangladesh historically has run a large trade deficit, financed largely through aid receipts and remittances from workers overseas. Foreign reserves dropped markedly in 2001 but stabilized in the $3 to $4 billion range. In January 2007, reserves stood at $3.74 billion, and then increased to $5.8 billion by January 2008. In November 2009, it surpassed $10 billion. And as of April 2011 it surpassed the US $12 billion according to the Bank of Bangladesh, the central bank. The dependence on foreign aid and imports has also decreased gradually since the early 1990s. Macroeconomic trend. This is a chart of trend of gross domestic product of Bangladesh at market prices estimated by the International Monetary Fund with figures in millions of Bangladeshi taka. However, this reflects only the formal sector of the economy. Mean wages were 58 cents per man-hour in 2009. Economic sectors. Agriculture. Most Bangladeshis earn their living from agriculture. Although rice and due to the primary crops, maize and vegetables are assuming greater importance. Due to the expansion of irrigation networks, some wheat producers have switched to cultivation of maize, which is used mostly as poultry feed. Tea is grown in the northeast. Because of Bangladesh's fertile soil and normally ample water supply, rice can be grown and harvested 3 times a year in many areas. Due to a number of factors, Bangladesh's labor-intensive agriculture has achieved steady increases in food grain production despite the often unfavorable weather conditions. These include better flood control and irrigation, a generally more efficient use of fertilizers, and the establishment of better distribution and rural credit networks. With 28.8 million metric tons produced in 2005-2006, rice is Bangladesh's principal crop. By comparison, wheat output in 2005-2006 was 9 million metric tons. Population pressure continues to place a severe burden on productive capacity, creating a food deficit, especially of wheat. Foreign assistance and commercial imports fill the gap, but seasonal hunger remains a problem. Underemployment remains a serious problem, and a growing concern for Bangladesh's agricultural sector will be its ability to absorb additional manpower. Finding alternative sources of employment will continue to be a daunting problem for future governments, particularly with the increasing numbers of landless peasants who already account for about half the rural labor force. Due to farmers' vulnerability to various risks, Bangladesh's poorest face numerous potential limitations on their ability to enhance agriculture production and their livelihoods. These include an actual and perceived risk to investing in new agricultural technologies and activities, a vulnerability to shocks and stresses, and a limited ability to mitigate or cope with these, and limited access to market information. Manufacturing and industry. Many new jobs, mostly for women, have been created by the country's dynamic private ready-made garment industry, which grew at double-digit rates through most of the 1990s. By the late 1990s, about 1.5 million people, mostly women, were employed in the garment sector as well as leather products, especially footwear. During 2001-2002, export earnings from ready-made garments reached $3,125 million, representing 52% of Bangladesh's total exports. Bangladesh has overtaken India in apparel exports in 2009. Its exports stood at $2.66 billion, ahead of India's $2.27 billion, and in 2014 the export rose to $3.12 billion every month. Eastern Bengal was known for its fine muslin and silk fabric before the British period. The dyes, yarn, and cloth were the envy of much of the pre-modern world. Bengali muslin, silk, and brocade were worn by the aristocracy of Asia and Europe. The introduction of machine-made textiles from England in the late 18th century spelled doom for the costly and time-consuming handloom process. Cotton growing died out in East Bengal, and the textile industry became dependent on imported yarn. Those who had earned their living in the textile industry were forced to rely more completely on farming. Only the smallest vestiges of a once thriving cottage industry survived. Other industries which have shown very strong growth include the pharmaceutical industry, shipbuilding industry, information technology, leather industry, steel industry, electronics industry and light engineering industry. Apparel sector. Bangladesh's textile industry, which includes knitwear and ready-made garments along with specialized textile products, is the nation's #1 export earner, accounting for $21.5 billion in 2013 to 80% of Bangladesh's total exports of $27 billion. Bangladesh is second in world textile exports, behind China, which exported $120.1 billion worth of textiles in 2009. The industry employs nearly 3.5 million workers. Current exports have doubled since 2004. Wages in Bangladesh's textile industry were the lowest in the world as of 2010. The country was considered the most formidable rival to China, where wages were rapidly rising and currency was appreciating. As of 2012, wages remained low for the 3 million people employed in the industry. But labor unrest was increasing despite vigorous government action to enforce labor peace. Owners of textile firms and their political allies were a powerful political influence in Bangladesh. The urban garment industry has created more than 1 million formal sector jobs for women, contributing to the high female labor participation in Bangladesh. While it can be argued that women working in the garment industry are subjected to unsafe labor conditions and low wages, Dina M. Siddiqui argues that even though conditions in Bangladesh garment factories are by no means ideal, they still give women in Bangladesh the opportunity to earn their own wages. As evidence, she points to the fear created by the passage of the 1993 Harkins Bill, which caused factory owners to dismiss an estimated 50,000 children, many of whom helped support their families, forcing them into a completely unregulated informal sector, in lower-paying and much less secure occupations such as brick breaking, domestic service and rickshaw pulling. Even though the working conditions in garment factories are not ideal, they tend to financially be more reliable than other occupations and enhance women's economic capabilities to spend, save and invest their incomes. Both married and unmarried women send money back to their families as remittances. But these earned wages have more than just economic benefits. Many women in the garment industry are marrying later, have lower fertility rates, and attain higher levels of education than women employed elsewhere. After massive labor unrest in 2006, the government formed a minimum wage board including business and worker representatives, which in 2006 set a minimum wage equivalent to 1,662.50 taka, $24 a month, up from TK 950. In 2010, following widespread labor protests involving 60,000 workers in June 2010, a controversial proposal was being considered by the board which would raise the monthly minimum to the equivalent of $50 a month, still far below worker demands of 5,000 taka, $72, for entry-level wages, but unacceptably high according to textile manufacturers who are asking for a wage below $30. On July 28, 2010, it was announced that the minimum entry-level wage would be increased to 3,000 taka, about $43. The government also seems to believe some change is necessary. On September 21, 2006, then ex-Prime Minister Khaleda Zia called on textile firms to ensure the safety of workers by complying with international labor law at a speech inaugurating the Bangladesh Apparel and Textile Exposition. Shipbuilding and ship breaking. Shipbuilding is a growing industry in Bangladesh with great potentials. The potentials of shipbuilding in Bangladesh has made the country to be compared with countries like China, Japan and South Korea, referring to the growing amount of export deals secured by the shipbuilding companies as well as the low-cost labor available in the country. Experts suggest that Bangladesh could emerge as a major competitor in the global market of small to medium ocean-going vessels. Bangladesh also has the world's largest ship-breaking industry, which employs over 200,000 Bangladeshis and accounts for half of all the steel in Bangladesh. Chittagong Ship-Breaking Yard is world's second-largest ship-breaking area. Khulna Shipyard Limited, with over 5 decades of reputation, has been leading the Bangladesh shipbuilding industry and had built a wide spectrum of ships for domestic and international clients. KSY built ships for Bangladesh Navy, Bangladesh Army and Bangladesh Coast Guard under the contract of Ministry of Defence.